morning. You're welcome to Dublin City FM. You're listening to Council Matters, the first live programme of 2016, and we certainly have a live wire as our guest today, former Lord Mayor of Dublin, Councillor Dermot Lacey from the Labour Party. But I'm going to do something slightly different today, and I'm going to say to our listeners, because of the theme, and the theme is, would the Labour Party benefit from a spell on the bench, or should they be playing in the second half of what I'm calling the home leg of the two-leg challenge? You can give your verdict on either myself or Dermot by sending us a tweet at Council Matters. So let's see how we go. Dermot, as I said to you, we've got an election coming up, probably within the next 5 or 6 weeks. So I'm not going to focus on candidates, or I'm not necessarily going to focus on parties. What I am more interested in is focusing on government, which I think, and I work on the basis that all governments deserve 2 terms. You know, unless you really screw up first time round, governments deserve, or administrations deserve, a second term. Is that something you would subscribe to?
No, it isn't. And good morning, Mike. I mean, I don't think the government of 1977, led by Jack Lynch, deserved a second term. In particular, their absolute plundering of local government in domestic rates. I don't think the government of Charlie Haughey deserved a second term. And I certainly don't believe the 3-term government of Bertie Ahern deserved 1 term, never mind 3 terms.
Yeah, I should have said.
So I don't.
Well, no, I should have said
it has a
unless
principle in any way.
The proviso is that unless they are so incompetent or so corrupt that they don't deserve a second term. In other words, if they're even if their management of society and the economy is mediocre, they still deserve at least to be considered a second term, rather than just chop and change for its own sake.
Well, I suppose governments deserve to be re-elected if they're competent and if they're doing the job, and secondly, if they're the best alternative on offer. And in relation to the election that will be over this day, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I think this government, A, has proven its competence, and B, is the best government on offer. Indeed, it seems to me to be the only government on offer. Fianna Fáil don't seem to want to be really in government, and Sinn Féin, I think, will do everything possible to avoid going into government.
Let's move on then. Government, what do you see as the role of the Labour Party in government? Because the Labour Party, they're never going to be the lead party in government. You're essentially always there as the junior party. So what do you see as the role of the junior party?
Well, I don't accept that the Labour Party is never going to be the lead party. I mean, we're certainly not going to be the lead party in the next government in terms of the numbers. Yeah. But in terms of what we manage to persuade the larger party in government to do, I believe our role is incredible. I mean, I think our protection, virtually alone in Europe, are protecting core social welfare benefits. The only government in Europe that has strengthened workers' rights. Collective bargaining, for example, something the trade union movement has looked for 100 years. Has been brought in by this government. Reform of the work practice legislation, improvement to registered employment agreements, 2 increases in the minimum wage. You see, sometimes politics is about the airy-fairy stuff of, the North or international affairs or all sorts of things. But for the Labour Party and the Labour movement, politics is about ordinary people's lives and making ordinary people's lives better. And I think our role in, if you want, moderating some of Fine Gael's undoubtedly right-wing positions has been quite impressive. We didn't achieve everything we want to do. There'll be things in this government I wouldn't be overly happy with, and there are things in this government I would like to see change. That's the work of the next government.
Yeah, with respect, I asked you the role in government, not the role of politics. My answer to that would have been your role is to keep is to be a check on the major party, whereas you seem to think that the role of the minor party is actually to get its agenda up, and you can do both at the same time.
The role of any serious political party, unlike the sort of debating societies on the far left, the role of any serious political party is to advance the agenda for which they were set up. And that includes going into government, and in this case going into government meant A, having some degree of check on Fine Gael's policies, and secondly advancing our own. But I somebody raised a question with me once, it's a bit similar to you once, and I sort of made what they thought was a strange reply. Fine Gael also have some rights. The people who voted for Fine Gael also have some rights. And you know, the role and the modus operandi of a partnership government, of a two-party government, or indeed a three-party government, is to have a bit of respect for the other party and to try and advance your own agenda. And I think the balanced nature of this government over the last 5 years, in lousy circumstances, has been to its credit, and I hope that continues. I'd like to see Labour maybe getting a little bit more, and that's the job of the party in government next time around.
Yeah. Would you accept then that by the numbers, their mandate always trumps yours?
I'm a Democrat, of course it does.
Yeah.
They have a larger say, but they can't be in government without us.
Yeah.
Or they couldn't be the last time round. I don't wish to be arrogant about the next all, but the last time round they couldn't be in government without us, and therefore a partnership was reached. A programme for government was reached and agreed. And we delivered some of their things, and undoubtedly they delivered some of theirs.
Yep. Can I move on then, Dermot? I mean, I would consider myself a subscriber to what I would call Labour values. Now, I'm not going to elaborate on that too much, but one of the core issues to me in that is the dignity of Labour. In other words, whatever we call ourselves, our work is important to us. Our work, while it's not the be-all and end-all, and pay isn't, the dignity of what we do is incredibly important to people like myself.
Yeah.
And I believe that that is a role for the Labour Party, that should be one of the prime objectives of the Labour Party. Is that something you would subscribe to?
The very name of the Labour Party, Labour, means work. It's about work and working conditions and workers' rights. And that is one of the things, particularly since the appointment of Jed Nash as Junior Minister in the Department of Jobs Enterprise. I mean, if you look at what he has done in about 18 months, establishment of the Low Pay Commission, the additional increase in the minimum wage, reform of the registered employment agreements, introduction of collective bargaining, and massive reform of the whole labour relations, labour court structure so that it's simpler and easier to access. Of course it is, but you can only have workers' rights if you have jobs in the first place. And one of the prime objectives which we shared with Fine Gael was that we need to get people back to work. Because unlike, as I said, some of the mini parties on the left, we're not a welfare party. We want to protect welfare rights. We want to ensure that people, stay above welfare income levels. But we want to get people back to work, because the ultimate dignity for the human being is to be able to go out there, earn their living, and to work, while at the same time those people who can't work for various reasons are looked after.
Okay. Something I will come to, and again, I'm going to talk about this from personal experience because this is what I know about rather than talk about something hypothetical, and that's CE schemes. Now, what do you see? The CE schemes are something that are very much associated with the Labour Party. What do you see as the role of the sponsor in relation to the employer? Do you see that they have a role in helping that person get a job?
I do, but there's also has to be a recognition that for many people the CE job itself is a job. And so CE, I believe, has two roles, and I don't think that's reflected enough or respected enough by the department or indeed by the former FOSS, is that one is to get people back into the workforce. Secondly is in many cases to help them back into the major workforce outside of supported employment. But in some cases it is about allowing them to work within their communities at a level at which they're happy. Now, that does bring into effect the situation whereby many people who are involved in, say, community organisations, community structures, become employers and maybe don't necessarily have the skills to become employers. And one of my big criticisms of FOSS, as it was, and now the department, is that they don't really enable some of the sponsors to be good employers. They impose an extraordinary bureaucracy on them and a level of paperwork which doesn't necessarily help either the worker or the sponsor, but satisfies, to be honest with you, some pen pushers in the department.
I'll go to what I know about, and what I know about is CE schemes in media, and I would suggest that the level of people who went on to get employment in media from CE schemes would be less than 10%. Would you consider that a failure?
I think you're relating it to certain areas of the media. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had an involvement in a newspaper called News 4 since 1985.
Yeah.
Myself and Anne Ingle established it back, 30 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into names, okay, because that would be really unfair on the public airways. But, you know, over those years, I could very quickly count 10 to 15 people who are now quite prominent journalists, photographers and broadcasters, who started on our paper, who got their first break into journalism through our paper, who in many cases got their NUJ card through our paper, and that enabled them to go on. There has been failures. I mean, undoubtedly there's been failures in areas of the CE scheme, but if you're asking me, do I support the CE scheme provision or not support the CE scheme provision, I support it. I would like it to be better, and where there's difficulties, they should be reformed. I was a member of the board of FOSS for 8 years, and I constantly tried to push this concept of a FOSS Users Council that would have an opportunity to input into the FOSS board when there were difficulties. That was always resisted by the main social partners, and it's a pity it never happened. I mean, I think it's something that would have helped.
Do you think then that there should be more oversight? Because what I've basically seen is very, very little oversight on the part of government, even when there has been malpractice and beyond.
I think there should be appropriate oversight, and I think that's
what would that entail?
Well, what it means is that there's some form of independent body to which people can go to as either employees or employers on CE, where there are difficulties in relation to any aspects of CE. The problem is that current oversight provisions are within the civil service structure. Now, the civil service have a particular view of CE. It profoundly differs from my view of CE, for example. So I can't go to the civil servant who is responsible for monitoring, say, my project with a problem in that project, because then they come down like a ton of bricks on the project itself in relation to issues. So
even if there was fraud?
No, look, any fraud should be reported. I mean, no scheme that I've been involved in, that I've personally been involved in, has ever been any allegations like that. I remember many years ago, not on my own project, there was a guy who was a supervisor and got into trouble, but it wasn't to do with fraud, it was just to do with lousiness of keeping books. Yeah. And I remember myself and a colleague spent a weekend helping him get those books into order, and we found all the receipts on. So, of course, any fraud should be reported, of course.
Okay. We'll come back to that one later. Let's go to another one, which I think is should be a core value of the Labour Party, is meritocracy. Do you believe that the Labour Party subscribes to meritocracy, and do you believe that the Labour Party promotes meritocracy in society? I'm not talking about within the party.
I do. It's a very hard thing to define, though, because and I'm going to probably get.
Well, the alternative to meritocracy is cronyism.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm a member of the governing body of UCD, so don't just be a broad attack on academics. Okay. But there are life skills which are not reflected in degree skills or degree holding. And I think you have to define how we judge and view meritocracy. I've all my life been a member of the Scout movement, for example. Sure. And within the Scout movement, one of the reasons why I like the Scouts as opposed to, say, sporting groups, is that within the Scouting you get rewarded for doing your best, as opposed to in sporting areas you get an award for actually ticking off a whole load of boxes and for being the best at each of those things. So very often there are people who actually bring to the table skills that are not necessarily reflected in academia, but would make somebody very good at doing a job. So I'm in favour of people being rewarded and being promoted and being acknowledged based on their real skills that are not always the same as paper skills.
Yeah, I accept that.
Skills on paper.
I wouldn't argue that. I have to say my memories of the Scouts are quite different, Dermot. But we won't go into that. I'm not going to knock the Scouts.
There have been lousy Scout leaders, like there have been lousy priests, and there have been lousy, all sorts of things. Yeah. But I'm a member of the Scout movement now, 50 years next year, and I had a lot of good times in the Scouts.
I would, as I say, I'm not going to knock a movement for for what clearly was some deficient individuals, is the way I would put it. Now, you and I, we've discussed the UCD one. Now, no disrespect, but my understanding, and I appreciate you've got a lot of experience in this country, but my understanding is Dermot Lacey has never worked outside Ireland, has never worked in private enterprise, and largely has worked within what I would call a cosseted environment. I have a degree from UCD, I wasn't even considered. Isn't that cronyism?
No, it's not. And first of all, I have worked in the private sector. I spent the first about 13 years of my life, of my working life, working in the private sector, in the hotel industry,
I
in
stand corrected,
in the
Dermot.
retail industry, in
Yeah.
the construction industry, and like a lot of people of my generation, for 2 years was unemployed. So, in fact, I have spent quite a lot of time in that sector. The appointment to UCD is very simple. I live right beside UCD. It is all in an old Dublin Corporation estate. It struck me that until about, I'm trying to recall the age of somebody here now, until about 10 or 15 years ago, nobody from that estate, and I mean nobody, had ever gone to UCD despite the fact that it was right beside it. The community also had a major difference with the former president of UCD over a major planning development. I was walking through the grounds one day. I was reflecting on the fact that that president was retiring, and I said, I wonder, does that mean there's a new governing authority? I went back, I looked up the act, I saw that the minister had 3 nominations. I formally wrote to the minister. I included in the letter, because I actually knew the minister, I included, the final line was, if you don't want to make such an appointment, I will never raise this with you again. I'm not trying to make any point, but I would like to improve community relations with the college, and that's why I applied, and hopefully that's why I'm a member.
I'll let it go on that one, then, Dermot. How do we know you're going to do a good job? How will we be able to gauge that?
Well,
it's a toughie, I know.
You can really, I suppose. I mean, you're welcome to ask the college president whether I make a contribution, or you're welcome to ask other people. One of the academics once recently said to me that, in fact, the councillors, there are 7 councillors nominated by by what are they called now? The Association of Irish Local Government. That's a long-standing provision, nothing to do with my appointment. But one of the academics was saying to me that, in fact, the councillors tend to bring a sort of a layperson's external view to the college governing authority, and are very often the voice of balance between the conflicting vested interests within the college. And I hope I bring a degree of balance to my contributions.
Something right out of left field for you, Dermot. I remember a while ago, Pat Rabbit said Frank Dunlop had approached him, he gave him some money. Pat realised, hold on, this is not, gave it back again. If the same situation arose, and leaving Frank Dunlop out of this, where a Labour Party TD was approached, offered some money, thought it was a bit questionable, and gave it back, should they report it?
It's very hard, you see, to say what's questionable. I received a cheque during, I think it was the 1991 local elections. 91.
That's a bit of a, that's a different era.
But just let me, just tell you what I did. I received a cheque from a developer who happened to live in the area. I also knew that he owned a site in the area. There was not necessarily any conflict, because they just wanted to support his local councillor. I, however, believed instantly that I shouldn't take it, and immediately sent it back to him. Part of my difficulty on that night, because I actually remember writing the letter, was how do you write a letter to somebody who's offering you goodwill and support and a donation to your campaign? It wasn't a huge cheque, by the way. And at the same time say, no thanks, because I don't think I should take it. Yeah. I think if you even feel it's wrong, it's wrong.
Should you report it?
Well, what are you reporting?
Well, okay, let's rephrase the question. Do you believe there is such a thing as a free lunch?
I think there are people who do support the democratic process, and this is a really difficult area because people expect. I remember a woman. I'll give you an example, okay, of an expense for a councillor, okay. Yeah. There was a small planning development in my area. It was a bit controversial at the time, and I went around the doors and I dropped in a photocopied copy of the plans and information. Yeah. About a week later, this woman came to me, who lived on the road, giving out stink to me. And I said, why? Because she said, you only dropped in the photocopied leaflet. I got a colour copy photocopied leaflet in the post from Michael McDowell. Now, Michael McDowell at the time was the Taoiseach, was the Minister for Justice, had an enormous staff and had free post. Yeah. But yet the person expected me as a councillor to have the same degree of resources. Yeah. No, just let me finish it. So therefore, in some cases, politics costs money, and you do need to spend money on it. if you receive any sort of funding from anybody who's involved in the sector whereby you can that you can influence or that you can sort of interfere in an inappropriate way, well then you shouldn't take the money at all. But I mean, I have had donations from people who support my campaign, local community activists, people involved in in the community who want Donnybrook or Sandymount or wherever, Ringsend, etc., to have a voice on the council, and they think I should be that voice. And in those circumstances, it is, okay, they all have to be reported now. I'm actually one of the councillors who has made full and absolute disclosures on all of my income accounts. I think when you look at the accounts that some people presented from the last local elections, all I'll say, Mike, is they have found not only the cheapest printers in the world, or in Ireland, but they have found the cheapest printers in the world. Yeah. All of my returns are right.
No, I just find it strange that you think that Ben Dunn might have given Charlie Haughey $1.5 million. Just because he's a good bloke?
No, clearly that's because it's to do with, Mike. It's to do with levels and extents and amounts and so forth. Somebody gives me €50 towards my election campaign. I would be an idiot to be corrupted for that, and secondly, I would be grossly, you wouldn't do it. Yeah. Clearly, giving people the levels of funding that some people were given did have an effect on them.
Okay, something I'm going to move on to. Again, it's an area that I've a degree of knowledge about, and I cannot believe that the Labour Party have got such a half-assed policy as the so-called shooting galleries. What's the status within the Labour Party of what we will say legalizing heroin for a short period in a certain area? In other words, what you're calling, what Minister O'Riordan is calling the injection centres. What's the thinking there?
Well, the thinking is that A, it's happening, and B, it's happening in public, and it's happening in a way which is very dangerous for workers in the city, in terms of people who have to go around cleaning up the city. It's dangerous in terms of children picking up needles and so forth, and it's bad for the city in terms of we've seen people shooting up. I saw a person shooting up there recently in Wicklow Street, and it's clearly unacceptable. The problem with any response to drugs is that it has to be massively multifaceted. Yeah. You have to.
That's why I said it was half-assed.
No, it's only one of many things that Aon O'Riordan is doing. First of all, the drugs task forces were a Labour Party initiative to bringing together the various interest groups. Now, the trouble is that when Pat Rabbitte, who was the minister at the time, brought it in, it was about 1996, I think. Yeah. They've never really been reformed since then.
Has drug policy failed then?
No, I think it has had some sort of an effect on containing it, but it's not enough, because there needs to be a better response in terms of socio-economic policy, in terms of improving the inner city, where a lot of drug addicts reside. There needs to be a lot of different things, but you're not going to resolve the drugs issue with any one thing. There needs to be lots of aspects to the solution.
So why go for an area like heroin, which is a minor problem by and large, on a societal basis? Heroin is a minor problem compared to alcohol. 10 times more people die than from alcohol. If you throw in tobacco, we're up to 20 times than they die from heroin, or all the illegal drugs combined. We will see regularly, we will see drunkenness in the streets. We will see people puking up, we will see violence. I can't see why heroin is now the major issue that we have to deal with.
Well, it's one of. I come back to this, that it's one of, and Aon O'Riordan's recent proposal on the injection centres is simply one response to one aspect of it. I can't remember if it was Aon or the previous minister who brought alcohol into the drug task force arena, and that's now part of responsibility and a response to alcohol policy.
Where are they going to get the heroin?
I am going to, unusually for a Labour Party person, I'm going to actually defend Michael McDowell.
Okay.
Because I think one of my big regrets is that Michael McDowell was not successful in its policy of bringing in the cafe bars and the smaller pubs policy. So I think one of the major contributions to our alcohol problem in Dublin, but primarily in Dublin, is the super pubs, the large pubs where the barmen don't know the customers and so forth. I suspect if I went to my local pub and if I was really drinking to excess, I think the barman would actually say to me, now he hasn't so far, but I think if I was really to excess, the barman would say, I think you've had enough, Dermot, you should go home. The trouble is in the super pubs, nobody knows anybody, pints are just poured out, there's trays and trays and trays of alcohol. We need to get back to a situation, and on the alcohol side, where local pubs serve to a certain extent local customers, and people know each other. On the drugs policy, there's loads of things we need to do.
I took this up with Aon about 3 months ago, and I said, Aon, there are people up in hospices that have got cancer. The only relief they are getting, and I know this from personal experience, is marijuana. That's all they want. Why don't you at least allow that into hospices? You can even sell it in hospices if that's what you want. Instead, we've got some half-assed policy that for 5 minutes you're a legal drug user, but you can get 10 years walking to the injection centre, and if you got some marijuana in your pocket, you can get another 10 years on your way out. To me, it's a policy that has not been thought out at all.
I think there's a case for controlled legalisation of marijuana in health circumstances, but I don't buy into the argument that marijuana is totally fine and acceptable.
Neither do I.
I've seen so many young people in particular who, if you want, drift into the whole thing through marijuana. But in medical circumstances and that sort of relief, I think it's MS that I just can't remember, one of the sort of long-term illnesses benefits. Yeah. I think there's a case for that, and I'm not against it. I think part of the problem, to be honest, part of the problem of Irish politics is that it is very, very hard to have an honest debate on anything.
Okay.
A politician raises an issue, and Aon has done it on the drug injection centres. A politician raises an issue, and suddenly it's all guns blazing against it. Okay. I think we need to get to a sort of a real politics where issues are genuinely discussed and people actually say, that's not a bad idea. And one of the things I like about local government is that happens much, much more in local government.
I just want one very, very quick one, Dermot, because we're going to run out of time. The other area where I just can't believe, Kevin Humphreys brought in some brilliant legislation for transgender. I cannot praise him highly enough, and he's a man in your neck of the woods. Then I find Labour women want to criminalise transgender sex workers, and I find that unbelievable. It's on the one hand, there we are being very liberal, and on the other hand, there we are being Ruhamed.
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't know of the Labour women policy. I mean, I come back to my general belief and my own personal philosophy. I believe that to a large extent people should be allowed to live and let live. That we need to protect people's basic rights, that we need to ensure that people are not exploited and so forth. But to a large extent, I'm not in favour of sort of the nanny state. I mean, again, I'm somewhat different from some of my colleagues. I'm probably the least politically correct member of the Labour Party. I believe that people's lives, they should be able to live their lives the way they want to be. So I'm not in favour of willy-nilly criminalising people. It's not a policy particularly new, but it's I don't want to send more people to jail. I want to send less people to jail.
Dermot, a fresh voice and a liberal voice for the Labour Party. Was I fair?
You are very fair.
Thank you, Dermot. Thank you. That's Dermot Lacey, always a very welcome guest.